Good morning, everyone, and welcome to this webinar on how to build credibility as a speaker, trainer, or facilitator. And you'll learn as we go through this 30-minute webinar that credibility is one of those crucial elements in terms of your ability to get your message across. So Peter Dew is my name, and I specialize in helping you be a better speaker, a better facilitator, increase your confidence, increase your effectiveness. Part of that effectiveness is being more credible. Most of you have attended webinars before, but please do take notes, participate, ask questions, think about the content. Is there anything you're going to do or change as a result of some of the information I share today? Type your questions in at any stage into the question box. Don't wait for me to say, are there any questions? Type your comments. Does this help with credibility? What if I've starting in a job for the first time? How do I build credibility? I'm a new manager, I'm a new leader. I don't have the background, the experience to demonstrate credibility. How can I build credibility then? So make those comments, ask those questions. All right. So welcome. I love this little graph. I call this my 4 C's, and what we're really looking for is the impact that we have in our training session, the impact we have on our presentation, our facilitation session. And I think that some of the things we need is we need to have good content. We need to build rapport, to connect with our audience. We need to appear confident. We need to appear that we want to be there. We need to show that we know what we're talking about. And we need to be credible. I think if any one of those elements is lacking, then our ability to have maximum impact is reduced. If you've got great content, you've built a lot of rapport, and you strut yourself around really confident, you've done this 100 times, and you just lack credibility, you're asking me to do something new, but why should I trust you? What gives you the right to ask me to change my behavior, the way I work, to adopt a new way of thinking? Where are you getting that credibility from? So I think any one of these missing will impact negatively your end result, your ability to influence, persuade people, to educate people even. So today I'm focusing on credibility only. Now here's the thing with credibility. You don't get to choose whether you're credible or not. You don't say, I'm going to be really credible today. That was a credible performance. I'm going to tell a story that's really going to increase my credibility. You don't get to decide that. Credibility is assigned by the audience. The audience decides if they see you as credible or not. So ultimately, at the end of the day, you need to get feedback. And some of the feedback will be informal, i.e. we won't follow you. We won't change our ways. We won't adopt this new policy because you haven't demonstrated your credibility. You haven't demonstrated the reason why we should change. So I want to talk about what can you do to enhance your credibility in the eyes of the audience. Because no matter how credible you think you are, it's the audience, it's the group that determines, that makes their own mind up. After today, you're going to decide whether this was a credible webinar or not. So what can we do to enhance my credibility, your credibility when we get before an audience? Quite a few things, and these are just some of them. And the good news is it's not one thing. So I wouldn't hang my hat just on academic qualifications. So I'm a PhD. which I'm not. So, my doctorate means you need to follow me. You need to believe me. You need to be unquestioning in what I'm asking you to do because I've got a PhD. That alone is not enough. I've written a book. That alone is not enough. You need a range of things that add to your credibility. And any one of them that falls down could make the whole stack fall down. And I want to talk about some of the things that you can weave in to help build your credibility. Welcome, Charmaine. We're just getting underway. So credibility is not just one thing. It's multiple layers that give your overall credibility in the eyes of the audience, in the eyes of your staff, in the eyes of the people you're speaking to. So let's get started. First impressions count. Do you want to be there? Are you well dressed? Are you a time management guru starting 5 minutes late? Are you a financial planner who says, don't invest in depreciating assets? Don't buy cars and clothes because their value goes down. And what car does your financial planner drive as he pulls up? A Mercedes-Benz. And all it shows is that they're pretentious and they're not following their own financial advice, which is invest in appreciating assets, whatever that may be. So what's your first impression? The handshake. Do you hold out the floppy fish and do a wet handshake? Or do you do a good mirror and match handshake? Don't crush someone's knuckles. First impressions count. Do you walk on stage with confidence? Or do you kind of walk on stage hesitantly? And does your body language tell the audience that you really don't want to be there? You only have one chance of making a good first impression. Have you arrived early and had a chat with the participants? Are you first at the meeting? And are you just introducing yourself? So when the presentation, when the workshop starts, you are not a stranger. I got on this webinar 5 minutes early. Sarah was first, Stephen was second, Cara was third, and I was having those little chats. So when we started at 9 a.m., I'd already built a little bit of rapport and connection, although it's still hard, via webinar. So first impressions count. How do you make a good first impression to your audience? Now, I just want to, one of the things is about knowing your audience. So, Mr. Suit and Tie, you can't see that one. Mr. Suit and Tie, this is great for business meetings. If these people turned up at a mine site or a labourers conference dressed like that, they're probably overdressed. So first impressions should also match the first impression of the audience. So I try and mirror and match and find out who's going to be in the room, and I dress accordingly. So suit and tie is perfect for lawyers, for certified practicing accountants. You know when to wear the tie and when not to. But make sure you make a good first impression. I believe that men make a first impression in about 7 to 8 seconds, and women make a first impression in 4 to 5 seconds. The way you walk, the way you smile, the way you breathe, relaxed. That's first impressions. Your experience. Your experience can come from anywhere within your life. And some people don't understand the true difference between your CV and your resume. And when you're speaking, you're allowed to draw from your whole CV. This is your curriculum vitae, your curriculum of life. The resume is a subset of your CV that you put forward generally to get a job. So don't forget your experience relates to your whole life. So you're in a new job and you've never worked in that area before, but your problem-solving skills can be transferred from somewhere else in life. You've never led a team before. However, you are a president of a sporting club and you have a committee of 10 people and you've got 400 members of this netball club and you are the president and have been the president for 5 years and you exhibit leadership skills. Grab that information out of your CV and use that to build credibility, not only for the job interview, but when speaking. So your struggle, your journey. Most of you know that I am a person who stutters. I still stutter, but I love helping people overcome their fear. And I share my journey of not being able to speak, my journey of being overlooked for promotions, being rejected, to show people that anyone can do public speaking. Anyone can be influential, educational, inspirational when you stand up and get before a group of people to share your knowledge, your expertise. So your expertise comes from everywhere in life. It's not just for the resume in that particular area on what you're speaking about. If you're talking about leadership, leadership is in everything you do. Where does your data come from? People quote statistics all the time. If you want to be credible, make sure you use a credible data source. Australian Bureau of Statistics, World Health Organization, UNESCO, according to the Cancer Council of Australia, some clinical trials, and then there's those big overarching meta-analyses that look at all the research, aggregate it and put it together, and then the Cochrane Institute, a medical organization around the world that looks at all the research, has dispelled the myth that cranberry juice will stop you from getting urinary tract infections. I'm sure you wanted to know that. So you go and buy $30 capsules from your pharmacy, from your health shop, cranberry capsules, cranberry juice, but the big analysis says it doesn't do you any harm, but it doesn't prevent urinary tract infections. Where does your data come from? I was at a workshop in Bendigo and a lady announced that, and this is a few years back, every week a woman loses their life at the hands of a loved one. So this is, of course, domestic violence, family violence, and this is just women. And of course, 95% of those perpetrators will be men, but not all men. And I now believe it's up to about 70, this year, 70 deaths, 2018, 70 deaths as a result of family violence. And someone asked her, where did you get that data from? And her response was, well, I just know. I just know every week a woman loses her life at the hands of her loved one. Yeah, but where'd you get the data from? Look, I don't know. It's just a figure. It's right, and I know. And her credibility in the eyes of the audience just went down. And I know it is correct. It's more than that. But just quote your source of. If you want people to believe you, if you want people not to question you, if you want people to follow you, make sure you have credible data. Along with experience, writing and publish can help build you up as an expertise. I have a book. I have 2 books. One is How to Overcome Your Fear of Public Speaking. The second book is How to Write a Killer Speech. So how to prepare a keynote speech or a presentation or a wedding speech. I write blog posts on LinkedIn, in my newsletter, on my website. I try and create a blog post every couple of weeks. Some people blog every week. It's around building your expertise and your content. And as you build your followers, to some extent, your credibility does increase. Do you contribute and write articles to your journals, to your magazines, your professional magazines, the Certified Practicing Accountants, the Financial Planners Association, the Engineers Professional Body? Create a podcast. Podcasts are so easy to do. Seth Godin said, if you're not podcasting, you're not really creating content. People consume podcasts nowadays because you can consume a podcast in small chunks. While you're on the train, while you're driving, while you're commuting. You cannot read my article or my blog or my book while you're driving your car. Cars are coming with Spotify and other iTunes inbuilt to the car. So you tune to your favorite podcast on the car and you consume it. And then when you get in the car the next day, it will resume that podcast at the same chapter or at the same place where you stopped. If you want to build credibility, make sure you're creating content. And it doesn't have to be an audio, just a written blog. It can be an audio blog. It can be a video blog. Some people do webinars like this and they strip out the audio and that becomes the podcast, and they upload the video to YouTube and that becomes their YouTube, their video blog, repurposing content. And of course, further experience, build credibility, such as get testimonials. Those people who are your raving fans, get them to write something. Get them to put that on LinkedIn. Many people in the employment world will go to LinkedIn and check that you've done what you've done. And if you've got people that say you're great at problem solving, you're a fantastic project management, you're good at public speaking skills or training, those testimonials help build your credibility. Get in the media. The media is very busy, and when someone writes a really good press release on an interesting story, the media like to run that because it makes their job easy. If they have to go out and do the research, find a spokesperson, that makes work for them if you deliver it to them on a plate. And of course, success. Client success stories. I do apologize. I have just jumped slides. Client success stories. Similar to testimonials. So when you work for BHP or Rio, or some other big organization, that really does build your credibility. Are we back? Let me just push that into presentation mode. So further credibility, all of these things are adding to your credibility stack. It's not just one thing. I have a PhD. I have a book. I've worked in medical science for 30 years. Therefore, I must be credible. It's more than one thing. Sometimes you need to borrow credibility. So you're in a new job and you don't have expertise in that area. A new graduate, for example, and you're asking people to do things in a different way. Find some other recognized expert who says the same thing that you're saying and quote them, borrow their credibility. I tell people that the more preparation you do for public speaking, the easier it will be. The more preparation you do before you run a workshop, before you do a keynote, the easier it will be for you. Winston Churchill had a philosophy of every minute that he spoke, he spent 1 hour of preparation. So if he had a 10-minute address in Parliament, he would spend 10 hours the day before prepping before he spoke. That was his paradigm. That was his model. Now, when you think about it, if Winston Churchill says, do lots of preparation, that's the key to his success. And Peter Dew says, do lots of preparation, that's the key to your success. Surely I've got to be right if Winston Churchill said it. That is, in fact, borrowing credibility. If I ask you to listen when solving problems, to be really empathic, and Stephen Covey says seek, one of his keys to 7 habits of highly effective people is they seek first to understand. They fully understand. They listen before they speak. So that's borrowing credibility. Maybe the Canadians are doing something very creative in social housing, in dealing with homelessness, and you're proposing this in your work. It's never been thought of. You're a new kid on the block. Why would anyone listen to you? You have no credibility. Borrow that credibility from a credible source, and then you can say, well, here's some evidence, here's a report, here's research, here's what the Canadians are doing. Why don't we give it a go? So that's called borrowing credibility. Part of your credibility comes from your passion. Without passion, people probably won't believe you. And of course, Aristotle said that all speakers must have pathos. So that's the emotion, the passion, the energy, the self-belief that the speaker, the presenter, the trainer brings to the room. If you walk into the room and you think it's just another training, it's a health and safety induction. And, you know, it's my job, so I'm going to talk about the importance of health and safety, how many near misses we've had in the last 12 months, and it's your responsibility. So let me go through. I'm going to tick the box, and at the end of the day, we're compliant. We've complied with our safety regulations. It's up to you. Now, I don't really care whether you hurt yourself or not. I've done my job. I'm not showing you the passion. I'm not really aligned with my own message. If you want to be credible, make sure you're not only that first impressions I spoke about, but your passion and your emotion, your energy align with the message you're saying. Moving towards the end, your nonverbal communication can add to your credibility. Here's the thing. If the words you say that come out of your mouth and your nonverbal communication, your gestures, these babies, the nonverbal are not aligned, are not congruent, the nonverbal communication overrides. It trumps the words you say, and that will destroy your credibility. So the passion, part of your passion is your nonverbal, but you can just see it in their alignment, in their voice, their eyes light up. But the bigger nonverbals can also detract from what you're saying. And here's a little image. These are stick figures. I don't need to tell you what the grey person is saying to the gold person. I don't need to tell you that he's saying, don't bother me. I'm not interested. Rack off. Leave me alone. You can see that in the nonverbal communication. So here's some mistakes that will interfere with your credibility, as well as the passion. And forgive me for using some of our esteemed leaders of the past. But open fingers and bouncing up and down as you're asking people to follow you and telling a new policy, this is not a good sign of credibility. I would close my fingers, I would put my palms down, and I would keep them still as I'm suggesting that this is the way forward. Are you aware of what your nonverbal communication is saying about you? Your body speaks so much. It could be detracting from your credibility. Just going to pause for a moment. Are there any questions? Are there other politicians that lack a bit of credibility as a result of nonverbal communication? Thanks, Sarah. Yeah, well, I'm glad you asked that question. Two, in particular, Malcolm Turnbull, who's no longer our Prime Minister, he has a habit of bouncing his hands up and down as he speaks, as if he is conducting an orchestra. So flapping your hands round and round, doing nothing of significance, is not good nonverbal communication. And of course, my next picture, Tony Abbott. Tony Abbott started most of his sentences with an open mouth. It just doesn't look very credible. This is not detracting from this is a Rhodes Scholar. This is a very clever man, regardless of your political persuasion. Julia Gillard was a very clever lady also, a lawyer. And I think Julia lacked the support of the Australian people that she deserved. She lacked the credibility sometimes because of her nonverbals. And also Tony Abbott normally starts with with some sort of or an R, a nonverbal that means nothing. Sorry, an auditory, a verbal sound that doesn't mean anything. Silence makes you look more credible. Silence makes you sound more intelligent. If you asked me, what am I doing next? I can answer that question in two ways. I'm actually catching up with my 3-year-old granddaughter, or I'm actually catching up with my 3-year-old granddaughter. Now, let's say it's a difficult question, so you have to think the pause, the silence, while looking credible, sounds more intelligent than the I'm going to be catching up with my 3-year-old granddaughter. And I needed to think because it was a difficult question, not a simple question. Stay silent. So nonverbal communication is so important in your credibility. Don't let it white ant you. Use the right language, the right stories, the right case studies for your audience. This is part of your preparation. When I work with the mining sector, I don't tell my health and disability stories. When I work with the health and disability sector, I don't tell my mining stories. I remember a great speaker, a West Australian, but he goes Australia-wide, Gwen Capelli. And when he talks to the mining sector as a keynote speaker, a conference speaker, 4,000 or 5,000 people in the room, Glenn has zero experience in mining. He's got nothing. So how's he going to connect, build rapport and some credibility? He's a school teacher by training, but he's a very clever man. So Glenn talks about growing up in Kalgoorlie and playing in the disused mine shafts and climbing all over the mining equipment, and how that's how he grew up in the red dirt of Kalgoorlie. And straight away that breaks down a few barriers, builds a bit of trust and connection, doesn't give him credibility to talk about mining practices, mining procedures, but it gives him credibility or trust that he has an understanding of the mining lifestyle. But now he's going to talk about leadership or engagement, one of his areas of expertise. So what are you going to do to be more credibility? What are you going to do to build your credibility stack? Lots of workshops coming up. Those of you in Perth, we've got how to have difficult conversations, speaking off the cuff, presentation skills. Then we're down to Bunbury. We're up to Karratha. I've just set a workshop for Melbourne for the 13th of 14th of February, I beg your pardon, 14th of March, that's why it's not there yet. We're in Bendigo around the 22nd, 23rd, 24th of March. A whole range of workshops. There's the Karatha workshops. So make use of me, share these with your colleagues and friends. Upcoming webinars, that's today, how to build credibility, 7 strategies to open your presentation. This is what's the first words you say. It's about building rapport, connecting and grabbing attention. So I'm going to leave the webinar there. Remember, I've recorded this. Some of you joined late. If you want the recording, I will make that available. Remember my opening slide, or my third slide. Your presentation impact requires a number of things. Your content, you need good content. Your connection, you need rapport. You need that understanding. You need your confidence, and you need credibility. Any one of those 4 C's falls over, the impact you have may not be what you wanted. I'll leave you with that.